Alright, what's up guys? Today we are starting the rest of our Unit 7, which has to do with 7.6, 7.7, and 7.8 are all going to be about 3D figures. So to start, on 7.6 we are going to learn exactly what a polyhedron is. So to start with, we're just going to look at some vocabulary. So here, if you have a geometric solid that has 3 dimensions, those 3 dimensions are known as length, width, and height. So if you have a shape that has 3 dimensions, it has a length, it has a width, and has a height. So you notice there's 3 different measurements there. On the next one here, we're going to learn exactly what the definition of a polyhedron is. A polyhedron is a solid formed by polygons that encloses a region of shape. So keyword here is polygon because the word poly is in polyhedron. A polygon is any closed shape like a square, a rectangle, a triangle, anything that has straight sides and is enclosed is a polyhedron. So a polyhedron is made up of multiple polygons put together to close a region of shape. And each one of these polyhedrons has a flat surface called a face, has a line segment where 2 faces meet is called an edge, and the point of intersection of 3 or more edges is called a vertex. So right below we have different polyhedrons here to the left, and basically it's going to point out exactly what we just talked about. So if you look at this very top arrow right here on this triangular prism, the very top arrow is pointing at 3 different lines meeting at one point. So this guy is going to be known as the vertex. The flat surface here on this shape of the triangular prism, the second arrow, is going to be known as a face because it is the flat surface of the triangular prism. And then where 2 faces meet, so you see where this triangle at the bottom and that face it's pointing at where they meet, this is going to be known as an edge. So this is going to be 2 3D shapes that have vertexes, faces, and edges because they're known as polyhedrons. So since both of these shapes are made up of multiple polygons, these 2 shapes are known as polyhedrons. But now if we look over here at this cylinder, this is not going to be a polyhedron because it's not made up of completely different polygons. It has a curved surface. So basically the difference between a polyhedron and not a polyhedron is a polyhedron does not have any curved surfaces. This one over here that is not has a curved surface, so it's not a polyhedron. So remember, polyhedrons are made up of flat surfaces here. Alright guys, so the next thing we're going to look at is we're going to get a little bit more specific on a type of polyhedron. So we know there's multiple types of polygons out there. So today we're going to talk about a specific polyhedron which is known as a prism. And we know by definition here, a prism is a type of polyhedron with 2 bases. So if we have a shape that has 2 different bases, this is going to be known as a polyhedron. But one thing we have to know is these 2 bases in a prism face which are congruent and parallel polygons. The name of the prism matches the shape of the base. For example, in a triangular prism, the shape of the base is a triangle. So basically, if you have a base, they're going to be congruent and parallel to each other, and we'll get more into specifics on that. So the next definition are going to be known as the lateral faces. The lateral faces of a polyhedron or a prism are parallelograms connecting the bases. So any shapes that come together to connect the bases are going to be known as lateral faces. The next definition is going to be known as a right prism. A right prism is a lateral edges are perpendicular to the base. So basically, if you have lateral faces connecting the 2 bases, if they make right angles, they're perpendicular with the base, then it's going to be a right prism. The next one, a prism that is not a right prism, is going to be known as an oblique prism. Basically meaning it is not 90 degrees with the base and the lateral faces. And lastly, the altitude of any prism is the perpendicular distance from one base of the plane containing the other base. So basically, any lateral faces the edge is always going to be the altitude. So let's go ahead and look at this cube down here at the left side here. So the first thing, this arrow pointing to the top and bottom, these are going to be your bases. Because if you look up top, this is going to be a square, and down the bottom I have a square. And both of those squares are parallel with each other, meaning that if I was to extend them out, they're never going to meet, and they're going to be congruent because they have the same measurements. So those are our two bases. The arrow in the top right-hand corner is pointing at a vertex because it's pointing where three or more lines meet at a point. This one in the middle here is going to be known as my lateral face because it's the face that connects the two bases. So if you look here, I'm drawing this triangle or this square here, and it's going to connect the two bases. It's known as a lateral face. And lastly, the edge that connects the two bases is going to be known as the altitude. This isn't always the fact, but if you look here, this is going to be the altitude, the distance between the two bases. And if you look, this makes a 90-degree angle, so this cube is going to be known as a right prism. And then over here, this is an oblique triangular prism because the bases are not going to meet at 90 degrees. And this guy right here where it meets going straight up from the top to the bottom, this is going to be known as my altitude on this guy here. So now let's go to some examples. Alright guys, so this is going to be your prisms examples on your notes. So we're only going to look at the left side of your notes though, which is going to be pertaining to the rectangular prism here. Okay? And so all we're going to do is we're going to go through these and we're going to basically name what it wants us to name here. So on that first one, it wants us to name what the bases are. And it says here that remember, the shape of the base always matches the name of the prism. So remember, the bases have to be congruent and parallel to each other. So if you look, I kind of shaded in purple on here. It should be in gray on your notes. But the top base and the bottom base, those are going to be congruent and parallel. So those are going to be the bases of your rectangular prism here. So I want you all to realize that just because it's on the top and the bottom doesn't always mean that the base needs to be on the top and bottom. The bases can also be on the sides at some points here. But in this instance, we're just going to name the top and bottom. So right now, on the very top base, I have rectangle, and all we're going to do is name it. So A, B, C, and D. So rectangle, A, B, C, D is going to be your top base. Now remember, there's two bases. So the bottom one colored in purple right here is going to be your bottom base. So that's going to be known as rectangle, E, F, G, H. So those are going to be your two bases. So the next thing on number 2 on the left side, it wants me to name the lateral faces. Remember, the lateral faces are the sides or the shapes that connect the two bases. So if you look, I have a top and a bottom, and all the shapes that are going to be in between those are going to be known as my lateral faces. And if we look here, all of those shapes are also going to be rectangles. So the lateral faces, I'm going to abbreviate here, is going to be rectangle. I'm going to start from the left here. A, E, F, D. So A, E, F, D. The next one in front is going to be rectangle. Looking at this one is D, F, G, C. So D, F, G, C. Sorry. D, F, G, C. The next one on the far right here. So I'm going to name this one. I'm going to start with C. So C, G, H, B. So C, G, H, B. And then the last one is going to be in the very back, which I'm going to name that B, H, E, A. So B, H, E, and A. So ladies and gentlemen, those are going to be all 4 of my lateral faces. So now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. The next thing it wants me to do is it wants me to name all of the edges. So remember, the edges are where any two faces meet each other. So we see these lines. Each one of these are going to be an edge, and we have to name every single one of those inside this shape. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to start on the top, then I'm going to work my way down and name all these. So the first one in the back, I'm going to name AB. So line AB is an edge. BC, that's an edge. CD is an edge. AD is an edge. So those are going to be all the top ones up top. So now I'm going to go with the ones going up and down here. So let's start on the far left. So AE, BH, CG, and DF. So those are the ones going in between the bases. And now let's go on the bottom here. So I'm going to start with this line. So EF, FG, GH, HE. And so, ladies and gentlemen, these are going to be all of your edges. Okay? And then lastly, on number 4, it wants me to name the altitude. Remember, it says the altitude is the line segment that connects the two bases at a 90-degree angle. So if you look here, each one of these edges in between the two bases are going to meet the bases at 90 degrees. So these are all going to be my altitude, which is also known as the height. So in this shape, AE is going to be an altitude, DF is going to be an altitude, CG is going to be an altitude, and BH is going to be an altitude. So all 4 of these are going to be an altitude. So now what I want you to do on the right side of your notes, you have, looks like a hexagonal prism. I want you to go through and do all 4 of those with the hexagonal prism inside your notes right now. Pause the video and do that. And the last polyhedron that we're going to talk about is something called a pyramid. So I know you guys heard of pyramids before. They make them out in the desert. Pyramids, they are a type of polyhedron with only one base and whose lateral faces meet at a common vertex. So all pyramids have a point and triangle faces. So basically every single one of these shapes here that's known as a pyramid is going to have a point where they meet, and all of them are going to have triangle faces. And the height in a pyramid is the perpendicular distance from the base to the common vertex. So we're going to go to the examples. Whenever we get into examples, we're going to go into more detail with this. On your pyramid examples, I'm just going to do the one on the far left, which is going to be your triangular pyramid. So right here we know this is a triangular pyramid because if you look at this purple area shaded, it is a triangle, and then all of my faces that make up my shape are triangles. So the base is a triangle, and since my sides are all triangles, then that makes a triangular pyramid because they all meet at one point here. So I'm basically going to do the same thing I did with the prisms, is I'm going to name the bases, I'm going to name the lateral faces, the edges, and the altitude. So there won't actually be as much because there's not as much to this shape as it was to the other ones. So here we go. So let's go look at the bases. So I know there's only one base, and that is going to be the bottom triangle, which is going to be triangle TPS. So this triangle right here is going to be known as the base, which is triangle TPS. So the next thing we're going to look at are the lateral faces. So the lateral faces are all triangles, correct? And they all meet at one point, so I'm basically just going to name those 3 triangles. So I have triangle TRS, so that's the front one. I have triangle TRP. And then lastly, I have triangle SRP. And those are going to be the 3 triangles that make up my triangular pyramid here. Okay, and then next are going to be the edges. Remember, edges are any lines that are made when 2 faces make each other or meet each other. So basically, I'm going to go ahead and just name the bottom ones first. So let's go ahead and name these edges. So the bottom one here is TS. I have SP. And then I have PT. And those are the ones all on the bottom. Now let's go ahead and name my lateral edges here. So let's go ahead and look at this triangle right here in front. So I'm going to have TR. That. I have TR, I have PR, and then I have SR. And ladies and gentlemen, those are going to be all of my edges that are made whenever I make this triangular pyramid. And lastly is going to be my altitude. And remember, with the pyramids, it's going to be a little bit different. So it is going to be the distance from the very point of my triangular prism going straight down to a 90-degree angle here. So by definition, the altitude goes to the very point, then goes straight down to my triangle, which is going to meet at a 90-degree angle. So my altitude is going to be line RO. So line RO is going to be my altitude in this shape. So basically that's all this is just naming different characteristics of my shapes here. So now what I want you guys to do is pause the video, and I want you guys to go name all of the stuff that have to do with a square pyramid and a trapezoidal pyramid.